You guys remember that Finland and Sweden have expressed the will to join NATO, right? Now, again, this doesn't mean that they have 100% committed to this, but they have began this dialogue and this discussion. I want to show you this headline from Reuters. It says here that the Swedish Prime Minister rejects referendum on possible NATO membership. So they're saying here that, hold on, I'll read this to you. They're saying here that Sweden's government does not plan to hold a referendum if its parliament decides to proceed with an application for NATO membership, Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson said on Friday. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has forced both Sweden and Finland to review long-held beliefs that military neutrality is the best means of ensuring national security, with both countries expected to make a decision in the next few weeks. So Andersson said that a referendum was a bad idea, and then she said, "I don't think it is an issue that is suitable for a referendum. There is a lot of information about national security that is confidential, so there are important issues in such a referendum that cannot be discussed and important facts that cannot be put on the table." Sweden's parliament is reviewing security policy with a report expected in mid-May. Separately, Andersson's own party, the Social Democrats, are looking at whether to drop their objections to NATO membership, of course. With a majority in parliament backing membership, the ruling Social Democrats are seen as the biggest hurdle to Sweden applying to join the 30-nation alliance. Again, just as a side note, the whole point of NATO was to fight the Soviet Union, right? After the Soviet Union ceased to exist, NATO not only still exists, but doubled its membership. Food for thought. Make up your own mind about that. So the leader of the moderates, the biggest opposition party, has also rejected calls for a referendum on this issue. Quote, "Voters are not naive about Russia," Kristersson told Daily Aftonbladet earlier this week in a debate with left party Dadgostar. "It's very clear that Swedish voters have understood what happened on February 24th and have drawn their conclusions." Dadgostar, whose party opposes NATO membership, told Aftonbladet that Swedes should get a say in the decision. He says that this has to go, she says that this has to go back to the voters. There has to be very strong democratic support in this question. And Sweden holds a general election also on top of that in September. And this is an important thing. They say that an opinion poll by Demoskop in Daily Aftonbladet published on April 20th showed that 57% of Swedes are in favor of joining NATO, which is up from 51% in March. So we looked at those polls the other day, both in Sweden and in Finland. And yes, the polls seem to indicate that more people are in favor of joining NATO since the war in Ukraine began. Now, I'm curious to hear what your opinion is on this, but I think this is funny. I think this is funny in a sense because, these countries, again, they claim that they're so democratic and they're so civilized and they are true representatives of the people in government. And yet, when there's a crucial issue like this, when Russia is saying things like this whole war in Ukraine, one of the big reasons, the big catalysts is NATO expansionism. And you cannot forget that Finland and Sweden are in Russia's backyard. I mean, if they were to join NATO, Russia would have another NATO country on its border, right? And then on top of that, Sweden. So this is basically telling people in Sweden that the government wants to do something that could really piss off the Russians and result in them putting nukes on the border nearby. And then they're telling them, we're not going to let you have a say in it. We're going to decide this, us bunch of bureaucrats. Wow. Okay. Again, man, I just think that this is really an indication that quite literally, it's not people in Sweden deciding this. It's the governments. And I don't need to tell you that the Swedish government is like this with the UK and the US, and even if they're not officially in NATO, they certainly take some orders. If you know the Julian Assange case, they take orders from elsewhere. So I think this is part of a strategy to basically annoy the Russians. And when I say annoy, I think that's putting it mildly, because this kind of, let's prod the bear I really, like, do these people have brains? Do they not understand that you could risk a nuclear war with this strategy, lend-lease to Ukraine, sending heavy weapons now from Germany. Again, the Gepard is not exactly the newest, but nevertheless. And then Sweden and Finland joining NATO. I don't know what they're expecting from this. The Russians, if you listen to their logic, they are saying that this is existential, right? And it's not just the thing, that's Putin, what Putin said and Lavrov said. Even Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, is saying that the goal is to weaken Russia. So this tells us this is not about Ukraine. This is about a proxy war between NATO and Russia through Ukraine. And Ukraine is being used as that vehicle to wage this war, which is, of course, very disrespectful to say the least. It's insulting. It's revolting that they're using the Ukrainians like this as a pawn. But keep in mind, again, when they talk about, it's a defensive alliance, I'm sorry, it's Syria and Libya would beg to differ. Yugoslavia would beg to differ about your definition of defensive. And when you have sentences, things coming out of the horse's mouth from Lloyd Austin, that this is about weakening Russia, that really tells you everything you need to know. This unrestricted pouring of weapons, $33 billion, $20 billion of that is weapons, and now the lend-lease. This is really about making money. It's about prolonging the war, not ending it. And I'm afraid that they're going to do one too many moves, one too many greedy moves, one too many stupid moves. And then you could very easily end up in a situation where there's a nuclear confrontation. And then, for lack of a better term, that's apocalyptic. It's truly apocalyptic. Even during the Cold War, just to stress this, even during the Cold War, you didn't have someone like the US Defense Secretary saying, we want to weaken Russia. This is outrageous. You didn't have the US president saying like, the Russian leader is a war criminal. What? Even in the fucking Cold War, they would not say these things. Do you understand that? They would actually sit down and speak. And that's what me and Pepe were talking about just the other day. That the whole strategy's changed. Like these people that are running the US government, the UK government, NATO, the EU, they don't understand the balance of power. They do not understand old school diplomacy. They are really just reckless. They are idiots. They have no idea what they're doing, and they're going to take us all down with them.